Hi guys, this is my video on how to create human level AI. The method is called Impact Maximisation via Hebbian associative learning. And I guarantee you this is going to be the best approach to create to get to superintelligence, right? So first we start with the objective function of the AGI. Okay, so humans, we do all these things, right? Self-preservation, procreation, increase entropy, try to propagate memes, and we also do other things which are not exactly self-preservation, like altruism and this and that, and all those things. So if there's one word that can sort of encapsulate all of that, it is making an impact, right? So I've sort of dealt with this in a bit more detail in some of the other videos, so you should probably see that. Okay, but for now I would say that the objective function of humans and therefore artificial general intelligence is also to make an impact, right? So making an impact, it's the ideal objective because this impact maximization happens automatically in a very simple Hebbian network, right? So it's really convenient as well to have impact maximization as the objective. I'll explain how now. Okay, so what exactly has to happen for impact maximization, right? So this has to happen. So let's say you have an environment and then you have an agent in the environment. Okay, so if the agent is really dumb without any intelligence whatsoever, this agent is just going to perform some random output actions, right? And these random output actions sometimes may result in the agent making some sort of an impact, like you might just turn on the light switch and fan switch, and you can probably just stumble on the ball and kick the ball or do something, right? But also there's a good chance that he won't be making much of an impact because he might just get stuck in a corner and he won't really come out of it or things like that. So it's not very efficient in making the impact. It's just going to be random actions, and for a long time it's going to be stuck in a corner. It's going to be wasting time, so it won't be as efficient in making an impact. However, the efficiency of this agent to make an impact or maximize this impact can be improved a little bit if we make the agent to do the following thing. So let's say this agent, right? If he sees something, if he sees the same old stuff, right? So nothing new. He just keeps looking at the same wall in whatever direction he's facing. He's not getting any new inputs at all. So in that case, he has to act so that he just turns around, he moves, he goes, he stumbles onto something else, and kind of just makes an impact. Whereas if he's already just performing, he's already seeing a lot of things happening in front of him. Say for example, if he had correctly turned on the television or correctly turned on the fan or light or something which is flickering and all that, he's already sensing a lot of impact around him. So in that particular scenario, the agent should just relax and not do anything to screw it up or cause a change in the environment, right? So in this way, he increases the chance of making an impact a little bit. So this obviously is a very simple action for him, but more sophistication to this can happen, and then eventually the agent will become more intelligent, right? So even in the case of relaxing while seeing the input, relaxing while seeing an impactful input, right? An impactful input, after a while it becomes boring. After a while it loses the novelty, and uh, it actually causes the activation flow to the output eventually, and then eventually the agent tries to do something else, something new. So if you think about it, this is what happens in whenever we feel pain, we act immediately, right? But whenever we feel pleasure, like whenever you just had food or whenever you just got a massage or something, you just relax. Whenever you're watching a movie, you just sit back and relax and you don't really do much. whenever you're seeing things that are capturing your imagination, you just relax and just dwell on those good thoughts until something else come, until eventually you get bothered by something else, and then you kind of act and all that, right? So temporary suspension of action while seeing something impactful, that is the way to do impact maximization. And I'll tell you how this happens naturally in a normal Hebbian learning network. But yeah, actually, before that, so even in your actual body, right? Like whenever you see a stress hormone, which is cortisol, which is released whenever you're releasing pain or um, boredom or stress or anything like that, cortisol is actually preparing your body for output action. Whereas whenever you're happy and relaxed, you have endorphins. Endorphins, what does is it just takes the activation to all parts of the brain, and then so it leads to the supply going to all organs, and make sure so that all the organs are replenished and all that. So it just sort of improves your overall health. Whereas pain or cortisol, it prepares your body to spend some energy and makes your body ready for action, right? So on that level also this theory kind of matches. And so now we look at how even a very simple Hebbian neural network is able to do that, right? So this is the scenario number one. Scenario number one, it's pain, right? So pain signal, so the dot 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 means that it's pretty okay. So this synaptic summation happens in two ways, right? Where a synapse gets enough potential to overcome the resting potential, and makes the cell fire. So that process, so this is the synaptic neuron and postsynaptic neuron. This is the presynaptic neuron. So what this means is continuous activation is coming from the presynaptic neuron to the postsynaptic neuron, right? So this is the case where the agent is seeing the same old monotonous input, same old blank empty room. It's seeing that. So nothing new, it's not sensing anything new, it's getting the same old thing, and eventually it fires. This connection becomes stronger, and then it follows the same path. This from the activation from here goes to here and to here and here and all that. So because it's the same input, it's going to trigger the same set of path, and it is going to quickly flow to the output, right? So this is in the case of the same old boring monotonous input, right? And this is typically temporal summation. And so that is situation number one, where the output flows quickly, the activation flows quickly towards the output. And you have the other scenario, the pleasure scenario, which is typically caused by spatial summation. Spatial summation is where a postsynaptic neuron gets activation from different regions, neurons present in different regions, and different presynaptic neurons. These are typically from different regions. So let's say instead of seeing a plain room, you're seeing something very new, a new kind of sound, new kind of light, a new kind of sensory thing you are just inputting. And so things from all this is actually causing this particular neuron to this particular postsynaptic neuron to fire, causing this particular postsynaptic neuron to cross the threshold and fire. So what this typically means is, see, this is something in this particular neuron, postsynaptic neuron, is something which is in the pleasure sensing area of the cortex, right? So this gets fired only when sort of new activations from different regions are coming in for this. Okay, so here, because it's sensing a novelty, something for the first time, it is still kind of dwelling on it. It does not quickly take the activation to the output, because this region is relatively new, and the connection flow, see, because this combination of neurons is happening for the first time. So this neuron is probably getting excited for the first time. So this still does not know where to take the output, right? So these regions are not formed yet. So if you think about it, each of the neurons are actually kind of works kind of like a capacitor, because only when the resting potential is crossed, the voltage breakdown happens, and then the current flows through it. So until then, this region kind of just stores the activation. So here what is happening is, when a novel or impactful thing is coming in, it's just storing the activation here for some time. The activation is dwelling here, stalling here for some time before it flows to the output. So this process, is achieved. This is what we are trying to achieve here, right? So whenever there's something new, the system has to just first dwell on it for a while before quickly just causing the output to move and things like that. So only when it's experiencing pain or something, when it's getting electrocuted or something like that, all the limbs start shaking pretty fast. And then when you're anxious, you just start walking, shaking your hands and legs and in a very fast and random manner. And But whereas when you're something new or pleasurable thing, if something that you're experiencing for the first time, you just enjoy it, dwell on it for a while, and eventually, once the connection of this also becomes very established and then strong, it becomes something which gives you boredom pretty quickly. So from here you just try to go on to the next concept and all that. Okay, so everything gets bored to you eventually, right? Especially if you've seen the same movie again and again, you don't really want to do it. And if you're getting old, you lose all sense of taste and all that. So this is it. This is the key part here. So we, even in a basic simple neural network, Hebbian neural network, we're able to achieve this impact maximization thing, right? And I also want to quickly explain a little bit about how this associative learning happens, right? So but before that, let me just show you this associative learning, natural byproduct of Hebbian learning and the conditioned responses. So Watson says conditioned response and associative learning can explain everything, language, poetry, whatever higher order intellect that you want, humor or prediction, or even the most basic instincts, or even, let's say, reflex action or something. I think according to Watson, and it's pretty simple as well. It's all that's happening is just Hebbian associative learning. That's what is leading to all these higher order functions. So you have this cortex, which is basically the same cortical structures repeated over and over again. When the height of the cortical column keeps increasing, the depth of the concept that is being formed kind of increases, right? So that's basically all of it, all the abilities. And then they are also connected in many ways, and that's how you connect, associate a sound with a face, with a visual, with a touch, and a concept and things like that. So different things get associated, right? So for this, we'll have to sort of let the brain evolve into different regions, right? So let me also just tell quickly about how the association learning happens here, right? So what I've mentioned here is system 1 and system 2. System 1 neurons are the ones that are getting activated when you actually see something, when you actually hear the bell, and when you actually see the bone. These are the neurons that are getting associated. But this is where in your memory, in your consciousness, you're forming that association. So let's say you're getting an input for bell, you're sensing that, and then from there the activation goes, and then it kind of eventually kind of gets to this particular neuron in the consciousness region, or whatever region, right? Whatever, whenever you're imagining a bell sound or something, this probably happens, right? So this is not actual as sensory neuron, but something that triggers when you imagine this particular sensation. So that one. And then eventually the next step, whatever happens, that is also that comes after this, right? And then activation from here, it goes to this particular here. So this is where the spatial summation is happening, right? So this particular neuron is very susceptible to getting fired, because it is about to receive signal from both here and here, right? So the spatial summation happens, and then this neuron gets fired, right? So now this neuron is kind of active, and it's kind of in the chain of consciousness. And finally, after that, the bone input comes in. The bone is now again connected to this particular neuron, and right now this neuron is more susceptible to fire, because it is getting the inputs from both this what it has currently seen, and also it has receiving inputs from this chain of this pathway of neurons, which have sort of which have formed a kind of a memory as to what has occurred prior to this, right? So and then I've put this arrow mark, because So once this neuron gets fired, right, there's also chance for it to go back and associate the bone with the previous things, bone with the bell, and other things that have happened prior to the latest one, right? So because even at the moment that this particular thing is fired, again, even now within the short period of time, this region is also a little bit more susceptible. So there's a chance for activation from here to again go back here, but this is typically not always the case. Say for example, if I ask you to recite A B C D E, you can pretty much very easily tell me A B C D E F G F or something like that fastly. But if I ask you to tell it in reverse starting from R, you're gonna struggle for now, because you know that from R it goes to S, but you don't know what comes before R, just like that. Because the backward association is not actually very strong. Okay, but the forward association is of events is pretty, it can easily be identified. So but the thing is, like, if you're watching a person talk, you're continuously getting bell and bond, these two inputs continuously, right? So there's a chance for you to associate a voice with the face, equally. So in that scenario, there is no first and second, it's just simultaneously both are happening for a long period of time. So this association and this association happens over there. But whenever you're trying to remember something on a sequence, it's not always hard. The activation flow backwards is not always very strong and very established. Okay, so that's how associative learning is also happening. So all we have till now is just a simple Hebbian neural network which can do the impact maximization on its own, right? So like I said, the key thing is impact maximization happens when the network stalls taking the output activation flow to the output for a bit when it sees something new and interesting, and then um, if it's a painful input, it just quickly goes to the output area, or need to do something about it area. So obviously there's got to be a lot of different regions that has to be developed within the brain. It's not all just the same kind of neurons, same kind of connection, number of connection parameters, same kind of activation threshold or resting potential. It's not the same kind of neuronal density. Different regions have different neuronal density. It's not actually the same conductivity. There's different the synaptic weights kind of correspond with the synaptic conductivity, so that also differs from region to region. And it's like you can't always say that uh, if it's output, it's immediately, whenever you're sensing pain or a bad thing, it's not like you're immediately acting, right? So it just goes to a region where it's formulating a plan. Any bad signal, it's actually going to a region where it's formulating a plan to sort of take the appropriate output, and after that it goes to the output, right? And then there's some sort of a cyclic thing that happens, which lets you do the right devise the right strategy and things like that. So all the feedback and all that, it all if you do the wrong thing, things get worse and things like that, right? So all those feedback mechanisms, even those things happen through associative learning. We don't need to design a new feedback mechanism like they have in reinforcement learning, or error back propagation, or stupid stuff like that. Associative learning, Hebbian associative learning, will automatically get there, through either spatial summation or temporal summation. It'll system will learn to associate the right action for the right situation and all that. Okay, so yeah, so like I said, in real life situations, it's not always that when in complex scenario, it's not always that the pain or bad news causes activation flow immediately to the output, or it's not the case that a pleasurable input always causes the activation flow to the out. I mean, always causes you to relax or things like that. In pleasurable scenarios, right? You first see something, and then once you realize that you're not getting enough pleasure of it, you take a little bit of action, and then you have the pleasure, and again the pleasure stops, so you take action. So that's the case with eating food. So first of all, you have the food in your mouth, you feel the pleasure, and after a while it goes away. So once the pleasure stops, you do it again. You go for another piece of food, or you go for another bite, and that's what happens, right? So in I mean, the system gets complex, in the end, but basically what is happening is this only. It is doing the impact maximization via this. It is whenever it is relaxing, whenever you have inputting impactful input, and then when it's acting, when it's in pain or things, or in stress or stuff like that. Okay, so that is basically it. So what we have to do now is, so start with the basic neural network, just 1000 by 1000. It has to be a three-dimensional Hebbian neural, obviously. So we have to just achieve impact maximization via associative learning. So if you're able to demonstrate that in a very simple thing, so we don't even have to take a very complex scenario. Let's just imagine that we are creating a worm brain. So worm brain, all it has to do is just, if it senses an obstacle, it has to kind of just move, uh, and then if it's otherwise, if it's safe, or if it is sensing some food or something, it just has to relax, right? So that thing we can learn, we can do. And then even if it's not doing any, even if it's not sensing anything, even if it's bored, even if it's getting the same thing again and again, what does a bored child do? A bored child, like a newborn child, it just keeps shaking its limbs and turns its heads here and there, and then whenever it sees something new, like a mommy's face or something, it just focuses on the face for a while, what it's perceiving, and then again it just changes back its head and does other things, right? So a simple impact maximization we have to achieve via association learning with just this. And after that, obviously we need more neurons in there. We have to allow the system to evolve, forming its own regions. We can't just be done with just 10 million neurons or something. We obviously need to get to billions of neuron, and then the way the neuronal density and all increases, right? That has to be we already know how the conductivity increases, right? The synaptic conductivity increases. That's basically the weights. That's basically the Hebbian learning. But then the threshold also differs for different regions. I'm talking about the resting potential of the neuron. And then there's also connection neuronal density that's different in different regions. If you're strong in math, in the math area of the brain, you probably have more neurons and all that. And then also the number of connectivity. Maybe the number of connectivity happens a lot if the neurons is getting more spatial summation or some things like that. I don't know. We have to really just get inputs from neuroscience and ask them, hey, what drives synaptic plasticity or neuroplasticity, or a number of connections or number of neurons, how exactly the new things are forming. We probably have to get it from neuroscience, and we can put that in to the algorithm pretty easily, right? So just a basic research on that would suffice, I guess. So but the first step is getting the achieving the impact maximization via associative learning. That's a pretty basic step. I think that can be done, and from there we can just put that thing into a toy, and then keep adding whatever sensors and input sensors and outputs. So we can maybe add camera, maybe add mic, and then maybe also have touch sensors, and then maybe we can the output could be we can give it some limbs and wheels and arms, and maybe a voice box or something like that, and ask it to make its own sound, and then eventually it will kind of come to realize itself, and it will evolve from there, right? So this, if we achieve this, that itself is AGI. That itself is general intelligence. That itself is worm brain. So from there, AGI to getting ASI, that also requires a lot of work and research and computational processing and all that, time and training and all that. But there could be several different training methods. We can even train it by, I don't know, genetic algorithm or something like that. It's just a weight updation, right? Whatever is more efficient. I know people would say that, oh, this is same as taking evolutionary time scale, and it will probably take a lot of time if you do it this way and all. But I don't think so, because we don't need trillions of neurons. Biological brain needs trillions of neurons because it is controlling trillions and trillions of cells within the human body, and it is regulating a lot of chemical functions and biochemical and metabolic functions and all. So our brain doesn't need to do that, our machines are going to be pretty stable machines, and we just need a handful of input sensors and a handful of outputs connected to it. So we don't really need trillions of neurons of processing power, but if we get there eventually, that will also be good, right? So if I guess you can just kind of think about it for a while. You can't obviously accept this the first time you hear it. You really have to think about each of the things that are presented here. But you can just the takeaway here is that it's a very simple and very elegant approach, and really easy to sort of, I mean, this is actually taking a lot from the I mean, it's very analogous to what's happening in the actual brain. So this to me is the best. It's not deep new, I mean, none of those reinforcement learnings or back propagation based, or what do they call those um, what do you call those symbolic graphs or something like that. It's not those are not going to be useful at all. Whatever is most similar to the natural process, I think that's what's going to be useful in creating actual general intelligence, and I think this is it. Okay, so yeah, so if you are a nice person, you just like and share this, and you should probably also just come down to the coffee shop, and maybe we can form a team here in Chennai.